A riot of ribbons. I have for you here some Beyerdynamic stage vocal ribbons, and this is a comparison between a number of them, kind of specifically between the V90r, which I've reviewed, which is their current offering, which is said by them to be based a reimagining of the M500. The M500 was released in 1969, and I think ended production in the late 90s, and then they've done a reimagining with the V90r, which I've reviewed. A little bit about ribbons, which I hope I get correct. They're about 100 years old, the design. It's effectively very simple, and they were considered to be the top quality mics in their era, which I'm thinking is around 30s, 40s, 50s. Here's how they work, my understanding. You have the poles of a magnet, and between those poles is a strip of very light, very fine aluminium foil. Often that foil is corrugated along its length, and then it's tensioned, not too much because you pull the corrugations out, too little and it sags. It's tensioned and placed between the magnet poles. And unbelievably, talk about the magic of the microphone, I mean this is physics, unbelievably, the movement of that aluminium foil in the magnetic field produces a very small electric current. I'd like to say something about that. I mean, call me romantic, but I like the idea of that simplicity. I like the idea that my voice vibrates that ribbon and the signal is produced within that ribbon. Nothing else. We've got the poles of the magnet. I think it's called induction. So it feels to me to be very intimate, that idea. And being a human being, I think I can hear that, but don't know. They are naturally figure of 8, so they were used a lot in interviews, radio, because you could have a person on either side. Here's your ribbon. Person speaking on that side vibrates it. Person speaking on that side vibrates it. Any noise from the edge is equal on both sides, so no movement. They worked very well at that, and they were used for that, and they'd be positioned so that noisy things were on the side and the two people speaking front and back. They had a reputation for being fragile and heavy, rather awkward. They were heavy because old school magnets, very low output, so a strong magnet helped. A strong magnet back in the day meant a big magnet. It still does now, stronger, bigger, but we've got much smaller ones for the same strength. The foil, there are people that make them on YouTube, show you how to make your own with a blade and the aluminium foil and your magnets, neodymium they use. You can make them. Somebody on the video did that to the aluminium and it just sort of disappeared. So the ribbon itself, very fragile. Magnets were heavy, rather awkward on a stand as well, but often they were in a studio. So what have Beyerdynamic done to be able to bring something like that to the stage? There's a number of things. The magnets are obviously smaller. These days they're using neodymium. The M500, the old one, I don't think was neodymium. The magnets are smaller. They've managed to make it cardioid, or I think some of them hypercardioid. I don't know how they've done that with the construction somehow. So they pick up mainly from the front. Obviously it'd be no good having figure of 8 on stage. Some of these are 30, 40 years old and they're still working. I assume they're original. They look it from what I could see. So obviously the ribbon has survived. I guess because it's very light, if you drop it and knock it about, there's not a lot of mass to make it, cause it to tear. The mass would have been mostly the magnet in the old ones. If you drop those, it'd be quite an impact. They've also done something with the filtering. The other susceptibility of ribbons was to breath blast, which would completely destroy the ribbon. So you need to filter that so you can get the sound through, of course, but without the... So I think some of the old school things about don't blow on a microphone, I mean, I think dynamics don't mind being blown on. I wouldn't recommend it. Some condensers don't like it because of the humidity in the breath. It's probably not a good idea to blow on them anyway, but ribbons in particular, I think it probably came from that. If you blew on a ribbon, you could destroy it. Back in the day as well, ribbons didn't like phantom power, so you could destroy it if you plugged it into phantom power. These you can. There is a note somewhere that your cables must be correctly wired, because if you feed the phantom power to the wrong pin, then you could be in trouble with these, I believe. But if you're using proper cables, they're wired properly, it's not an issue. So here we have then these ribbons, and let me just show you them. Why not? So this is a V90r. We'll look at them close up in a while, that you've seen before. This is the one I did the review on. This is another V90r, so let's see what the consistency is between the two current production ribbons. This is an M500. These are from different eras. I can't determine exactly, but I think I've got a rough idea. I think this is kind of 80s. It's to do with the logo and a couple of other things. I don't know if the serial numbers are much use. Here's another M500 with a switch, the Beyerdynamic switch that they use, which is noiseless, and I don't know if it affects the sound. If it shorts out to cut the mic out, then it won't, because when the switch isn't engaged, it will just be straight through. If it works that way, it's interesting. It's got seems to have a magnetic thing going on. And then these are two earlier M500s with the older logo, and possibly this is the oldest of all of them. Another thing that Beyerdynamic have done with these is that ribbons were known to be perhaps slightly dull on the top end, but very natural sounding. So they took EQ well, so you could boost the top end if you needed it. And they tended then to have I don't know which way round you are, you're that way round, a rising bass response. What Beyerdynamic have done is they've created somehow a presence peak, and it's pretty, we'll look at the graphs, it's pretty considerable. I think it's up around 10 kilohertz. The low end through the middle into low end is flat, but then it depends on proximity, and it has got quite a proximity effect if you bring the mic in close. So what they've done, they've designed a unidirectional handheld stage vocal mic that can withstand high sound levels, that can withstand being used by a vocalist with the puffs and the breaths and so on, and that has this presence peak which helps to cut through for stage use. It is quite, I wouldn't say severe because it's sweet, it's quite bright, but it's balanced by the low end, and you could EQ it if you want to. I wonder if because the design was from 1969, I imagine that PAs didn't have such a good top end. They haven't got the horn drivers and so on, or not as good quality as we have now. And I do find that it works well in fairly, on the boat thing that I do gig with, there's a bit of going on and people talking, so it does sort of enable me to get through, and I still have the warmth as well. So it seems to work. We'll listen. Another thing that is claimed for ribbons is because the ribbon is so light, we're talking about the speed rather like the Earthworks SR40V with a very small, it's a condenser with a small diaphragm, because the ribbon is so light, it's claimed that it can respond very, very quickly and gives almost a condenser-like speed, clarity to whatever it's capturing. Before I plug them in, then I'm going to zoom in and we'll have a look at them physically. I've also got some photographs of the innards, because I couldn't resist, partly. Some I got from the web. One of these arrived rattling, and I shone a torch, this one I believe, shone a torch through to see what's going on, and I could see something was obviously not in place. I then switched it on and listened to it, and it sounded fine. So I figured maybe I'd been lucky, whatever that was. I didn't think it was the ribbon. It came from Germany, I think. So I took the top off, which unscrews. And yes, I could see that the blast filter and block on top, which I've got I took a photograph of it, had come loose. So I glued it back on, and it's been fine. Just a little note about these, if you are working on these. Now, I've been told there might be two ways of attaching the top of the grill should you need to get in there. Be careful should you need to get in there. The new one has the usual Beyerdynamic 3 screws around the edge. So does the oldest. These 3 M500s, the top simply unscrews. I have seen online and seen somebody repairing a M250, which is similar, smaller, and the top seemed to be pressed on, so he levered very carefully. I was about to do that with these. Luckily, I don't know where I saw online, somebody said it unscrews, because obviously if I'd started trying to lever here, I'd have ended up damaging the thing, because it would never have come off. You just use more and more pressure until you think, what's going on here? So these, and I just turned it and it came off quite easily. So maybe watch out for that if you're there might be 3 ways. The screws around the edge, obvious. Try unscrewing here. It might be quite stiff. These weren't, but try that. As long as you won't damage it. If it is a prise off one, you won't damage it by trying this. It just won't budge. And then maybe try the prising, but I'd watch doing that until you're sure which type you've got. Let's have a closer look. We've seen this one before. This is the V90r. Quite weighty. This is the M500. I think this is a late-ish one. See from the Beyer logo there. Slightly earlier M500. I'm guessing 70s to 80s maybe. And this, I'm pretty sure, is the earliest example I've got. This one did have a DIN, Tuchel, I think they're called, DIN connector. And this is the Beyerdynamic replacement XLR that's been fitted. They did away with the DIN as time went by, and everybody's on XLR. I noticed that this one has a similar barrel material, has an XLR with a fitting there, which is slightly different. I'm not talking about the actual extension, but before that the band there is thinner than this. I think this was, I'm guessing, from what I've seen of the M88 and other Beyerdynamic mics, that this was the early versions of the XLRs that they used. Coming into the 80s, I believe, notice that the XLR is sunk. There isn't that extension, which is what happens with the new M88s as well. Same deal there. And obviously the same on the new one. Bear with me, a bit of detail in case you're considering maybe getting one of these. The new one I noticed has this rather fetching mesh. It seems to have then a finer mesh underneath that, and then a stronger mesh underneath that. So the finer one's sandwiched. That's what from what I could see. Underneath that, there are other very fine, not metal, but nylon type meshes. All to do, I'm sure, with protecting the ribbon from blasts. I think the stronger one underneath there, these are tour group ones, is to stop this denting. So they've done that to make it tougher. I just think, just don't drop your mics if you can avoid it. One of these, a second-hand one I got, had a slight flat there. It had been dropped, and somewhere else a slight one. So I took the top off. I saw a guy on YouTube saying to put the round end of a screwdriver, put the shaft in a vise. They've got the round end of the right side screwdriver. You can put the top over and you get a little rubber mallet and you can tap that out. And I was fairly successful with that, or leave it dented if you're not bothered. The 80s ones, I'm going to call them, seem to have just this outer mesh and then foam. You can never tell with foam because it deteriorates and people replace it, of course, sometimes, or sometimes they don't. But I think the foam that was in here was original because it sort of came to pieces. So it looked like they went to using foam in the 80s, and then the kind of nylon mesh thing, which you'll see in the pictures underneath again. Both of these from different sources came with that foam, both of which I've replaced. They were crumbling. I just used whatever current Beyerdynamic foam I could get hold of. This one, no foam. This is the early one. And again, the different meshes, so similar to the new, even though this is the older one. And now this one, I can't remember. This one screws on. This one, no foam. So the foam seemed to occur if everything's original, which it looks like it is. I don't think they could have removed metal mesh. I don't think anyone would have done that. It's not easy to do either. It'd be a right mess underneath. So it seems like the 80s ones went to using foam. And either side, they had the various grades of mesh. I'm going to plug them in then. What I've done with plugging them in, I've just set the mixer up visually so that you will hear some differences in output level between the various microphones rather than matching them up. I thought you may as well hear the output differences as well. So some might be a little bit quieter, a little bit louder. So you get some idea about that. I don't know if the magnets deteriorate with age. I think I looked online, they say it takes about 100 years. I don't know. Maybe dropping them doesn't help if they've been dropped. I don't know. So we just have to take them as they are. And that's it. I'm going to go through all of them and then select, because there's 6, select 3 representative ones to do more listening tests with, rather than keep going through all 6, partly because I haven't got enough channels or cables. Well, I have, but so let's get on with that. I've changed my mind. What I'm going to do first is do them in pairs, seeing as they sort of come from eras in pairs, and then choose a representative one from each pair. So let's have a look at these 2 current production V90Rs. The road is going off. This is one of them. So we're now on the V90R, which we've done a review of before. This is the other V90R. So what I'm listening for is, we'll put them both on together. About the same amount of handling noise. You might get some phasing here. A different pitch to the handling noise, pretty close. Slightly lower, much the same quality to it. I'm going to go between them. I know this isn't scientific. This is one of them then. What do I notice? I notice a kind of was going to say typical ribbon thing going on. Typical ribbon thing going on. This is the other. Do I notice any difference? 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 This one, to me, in all of this, by the way, trust your own ears. You have to have headphones and stuff as well, because it starts to get very fine, really, and but we might as well. I'm doing it, so let's do it. It seems to me that this one's a little bit warmer. It seems to me that this one is a little bit firmer sounding, a little bit firmer sounding, a little bit firmer, a little less, a bit more of that in there, a bit more of that in there. They both got it very difficult to do because, of course, am I holding them exactly the same distance? I think I'd say they're as consistent as you could hope for. Similar quality of sound in terms of the overall kind of ribbon thing, and the consistency seems as close as I can hear. So I'm going to go on to the 1980s pair of M500s. Well, again, a difference in handling noise, both quite low, lower than the new production. Maybe this one a little bit noisier, or maybe my right hand is noisier. Slight difference in quality. This is the M500 with a switch. I shall put it that way so I know which one is which. M500 with a switch, M500 with a switch, M500 with a switch, M500 without a switch, M500 without a switch, M500 with a switch. The M500 with the switch, I'm going to say, is firmer sounding. M5, bring it closer, M500 with a switch, M500 without a switch. Of course, this one's slightly louder, as you can hear. It's got I wouldn't say it's edgy, it's brighter. I wouldn't say it's edgy, wouldn't say it's edgy, wouldn't say it's edgy, wouldn't say it's edgy. This one's a slightly warmer representation, I feel, and not quite as not as much volume. This one has more volume. Take it away. It's to me, there's more of that going on. What about the bottom end? Bottom end is there. Bottom end is there. Bottom end is there. The bottom end sounds the same to me, but the upper parts on this one are not as brightly lit. Let's look at the eldest pair. The oldest M500s that I have. Let's do see what the handling noise is like. Different tone again, consistent tone between the two for the era. This one obviously a lower frequency. Going to call this one the silver one. This is a silver M500, the silver M500, the silver M500. The silver M500, the black M500, the black M500. I noticed with this that there isn't so much bottom end. The black M500, 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 M500. So the black one, it's got, I think of all of these, it's got the lowest output, and it doesn't have it's interesting, it's usable. If I boost the bass on this one, if I boost the black M500 to about 3 o'clock, silver M500 flat, silver M500 flat, black M500 with the bass at 3 o'clock. Excuse me, I can give it a bit more. The black M500 with the bass at 3 o'clock, the black M500 with the bass at 3 o'clock, bass at 3 o'clock, the silver M500 flat, silver M500 flat, black M500 with not quite so much boost on the bass. To my ears then, with a bit of EQ, it's quite similar. Just I'm back on the road. Just a note about that. Two things to notice. When I plug the older ones in, there's phantom power on the desk actually. Of course there is for this. Hasn't damaged them obviously. When I plug them in, there's a little bit of electrical noise, whereas on the others there isn't. There's sort of a little bit of clicking on both the older ones. The difference in tone. These ribbon mics have a transformer in the body to boost the signal. So you've got a few variables. The ribbons, how old are they? Are they covered in tobacco smoke? Been around a long time, been used on stage. These look like they might be studio models. The one I've got, they've been very well looked after. So there's that. There's the strength of the magnet, I guess. How strong it was to start with, how consistent that was, and over the years, whether that's changed. And the transformers are obviously an important factor. They take that tiny signal and boost it. So maybe there's a slightly different transformer in this one. Suitable. So what I'm going to do is then I'll get rid of the black one because it's perhaps a bit of an anomaly. And I'm going to swap that over to there. Put them in order for me. So we're going to have one of the 1980s. We're going to have the one without the switch. Sorry, 1980s earlier. One without the switch, 1980s, and current example. So let's get on with the pops. S's, breath, proximity, polar response, and self noise, which is a new thing I'm going to include. Here we go then. Road is off. Hopefully this is the new one. Pops, 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 pops. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. Make sure everything's flat. Peter Piper picked a pack of pickled peppers. It's peck. Yeah, it's peck. Peter Piper picked a 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 peck. Oops. They didn't like that. Well, you know, what can you do about pops? Be careful with them. Not particularly poppy, I don't think. This should be the M500. Peter Piper picked a peck. Peter Piper picked a peck. Perhaps slightly less on this. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. The older one. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Seems to me that the older one without the foam and the layers of mesh on the head seems to me that the older one was the best in that regard. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. This one not bad at all. Not bad at all with the foam. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I think the new one doesn't seem to be as, to my ears, as good. S's, stay with the new one. Susie, 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 Susie. Susie, 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 Susie. Susie, 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 Susie. You can hear this one's got more sizzle at the top. This is the brighter of the two 1980s without the switch. Susie, Susie. If I try to tame that, let's see what happens there. Susie, 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 Susie. If I increase the treble, Susie, 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 Susie. This is 12 kilohertz on the desk. Pretty much where that peak is, well, 10 around, I think, on the chart on this. Susie, Susie, back to flat. Susie, 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 take a little bit of it off. Susie, 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 shoeshine girl. Susie, Susie, shoeshine girl. This is the older Susie, Susie. Hasn't got that Susie, 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 shoeshine girl. Susie, Susie, shoeshine girl. Susie, Susie. V90r, Susie, Susie, Susie. Different quality, isn't it? Susie, 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 Susie. back on the road. Breath. Who do you think you're fooling? 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 Who. You have to be a bit careful there. Of course, I'm being very, very clumsy. Who do you think you're fooling? Who do you think? But I have noticed it when using it. Who do you think you're fooling? So that's the new one. Who do you think you're fooling? Who do you think you're fooling? Who do you think you're fooling? Who do you... When I'm doing this, I notice the Yeah, I noticed on this one that it's a very nice tonality. Very, I was going to say generous down there. Very free, feels very free flowing down there. Very free flowing. What are we doing anyway? Who do you think you're fooling? I think, to me, much the same. Who do you think you're fooling? 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 Little drier in the bass than that one, perhaps. Who do you think you're fooling? Probably the best managed, maybe, of the breath noises. Stay on this one till I'm there. Proximity. There we go. Bring it in. There we go. Bringing it in. There we go. Bring it in. Bring it in. Bring it in. Bringing it in. Bringing it in. Bring it in. Bringing it in. Bringing it in. Bringing it in. Hey. There we go. Bring it in. There we go. Bring it in. There we go. Bring it in. Bring it in. This one's got that little... It's quite useful live. If you've got a... I'm trying to cut through things. There we go. Quite prodigious down there. There we go. Bring it in. There we go. Bringing it in. There we go. There. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. Quick round of polar response then. I can't remember which is cardioid and which is hypercardioid, or kind of halfway between, but we'll get an idea. On axis with the V90r, on axis, coming round to the side, coming round to the side, coming round to the side. Quite extreme rejection, which you might hope for from a ribbon microphone. Round to the side, coming back towards the back here, towards the back there, towards the back. Some leakage towards the back, seems quite benign, well controlled. And again at the side, quite a lot of rejection, then coming on the front. That's the V90r. This is the, for want of a better term, the 80s 500 on axis, coming round to the side, coming round to the side, coming round to the side, coming round to the side. Quite severe rejection there, different quality to the rejection to the V90r. Round to the side here, round to the side, coming round to the back, coming round to the back, and a bit more of a honk, a bit more leakage and a bit of a honk, maybe round at the back there, rejection at the side, and then on axis at the front. Going to the old one. On axis, you can see it's different. Going round to the side, coming round to the side, coming round to the side, coming round to the side. There's a rejection. Round to the side, quite severe, which you'd hope for, expect. Coming round to the back, coming round to the back, a little bit of leakage there. But sounds quite benign to me, frequency-wise. Coming round to the front. Fairly similar, I think, on that test. I noticed something about the V90r, which caused me to include it in this test in future reviews. I've got the Mackie VLS Pro, I think it is, or VLZ Pro or something, and it's got an inbuilt transformer, which I like. So you just plug the mains cable in the back. You don't have to have a wall wart or a block halfway down the cable. So there's a transformer. I'm sure it's shielded. It's a good quality piece of kit. But we'll listen. I'm going to leave the Rode on, and then we're going to listen to what happens when I bring the microphone near to that transformer that's in the Mackie mixer. So the Rode's on, and then I'm going to bring that's the V90r in close proximity to the where the transformer is in the mixer. Not that you're likely to do that on stage, but this is the 500 80s. If I bring it almost touching, but as soon as I move it away, the older M500, very similar. As soon as I move it away, gone. Let me try the oldest with less bass, because maybe it's got a different transformer in there. Maybe it's a transformer that's picking that up. It's not acoustic sound. It's something that's being picked up elsewhere. This is the oldest M500 near the transformer. They're all very consistent in that regard, it seems, apart from the newer one, the V90r, which even from a fair distance starts to. So I don't know what that is. If it's a transformer, I imagine it must be. I can't think there's much else that would be doing that anyway. Anyway, hope this has been of some use for you. And that's it. I shall... what am I looking to review next? I don't know. We'll see what happens.